All right, this is big time. Got an article I wanted to read today, and we'll see if Wiki can join me. We'll see. So, found the website that I want to talk about. There's an article I want to read, and I'm sure talking about it get my channel in trouble, but we'll just make another channel. So, this is from the Publica. Transgenderism went mainstream. Now it's coming for our kids. By Josh Walkos. Today, transgenderism dominates political discourse and popular culture. The once relatively obscure medical condition is found almost everywhere, ubiquitous in print, advertising, and all modern entertainment. It has found a home in TikTok communities dominated by teenagers and young people, in schools and across the education system. Gender ideology is taught to children as young as 5. Teachers insist sex is not immutable and gender is fluid. Its growing representation has had a polarizing effect like few issues ever have. But transgenderism has not always been mainstream. As it has grown in popularity, we have reached what can only be considered the proverbial red line: the transing of children. This line is crossed daily around the world. Adolescent children are subject to hormone treatment and even surgical sex reassignment, SRS. In truth, these treatments amount to little more than mutilation, irrecoverably changing the lives of young people who are in the midst of critical physical and mental development. We once snickered at overprotective helicopter parents of the 90s and 2000s. Sadly, we now see the opposite in action. Parents are willing to medicalize their children for life, often to satisfy their own pathologies. And you could think of the Small Hats parents who adopted Jazz Jennings. Now the mom goes on TV forcing him to clean out the hole they created when they chopped his dick off. A woman should have a millstone put on her neck and be thrown into the fucking river or the nearest body of water you can find. What few understand is how we arrived at this intersection. Over the decades, adults have undergone gender reassignment in one form or another. However, in all human history, not one society until now has taken the steps, and with glee, I might add, to both normalize and promote sex reassignment in children. Knowing this, one salient question persists: how did we get here? Gender reassignment is not as new a phenomenon as you might believe. The practice has been a subject of controversy since the early 1900s. In America, it wasn't until the 1960s, when these surgeries were conducted at Johns Hopkins University by psychologist John Money and surgeon Claude Migene, that the foundation for today's gender ideology started to take shape. From the very beginning, sex reassignment was divisive, frowned upon. In hindsight, it should be seen as a cautionary tale that the world has ignored at its own peril. In the early 1900s, in response to the illegality of homosexual life under German law, a young small hat doctor named Magnus Hirschfeld founded the Institute of Sexual Research, a place where sex reassignment surgeries would be tested for the first time. Several decades earlier, the now infamous Paragraph 175 was established, criminalizing sex between men and making it punishable by law. Surprisingly, this law wouldn't be repealed until 1994, effectively putting an end to a century of persecution of male homosexuals in Germany. Due to Paragraph 175 and the prevailing negative attitudes towards homosexuality in the 1900s, gay men had no choice than to hide their proclivity. This created an underground Berlin of sorts that thrived for some time. Magnus Hirschfeld was one of its leaders. Hirschfeld, himself a gay man, disagreed with the popular opinion of the time that homosexuality was a mental illness. After receiving a letter from a man who'd taken his own life out of shame for his same-sex attraction, a deeply affected Hirschfeld committed himself to the study of sexual health, specializing in homosexuality. In 1897, he founded the Scientific Humanitarian Committee, an organization with members from around the world that promoted sexuality research. It was created in part with the hopes of abolishing paragraph 175 from the German legal code. During this time, Hirschfeld also developed his own theory of sexual intermediaries, what would be known today as non binary. He believed this should be considered a third sex known as Geschlecht. I can't say that in German. In 1910, he coined the term transvestite, and by the late 1920s, Hirschfeld's Institute for Sexual Research was performing the world's first sex reassignment surgeries. The first of these operations took place in 1926. Dr. Felix Abraham performed a mastectomy on a trans-identified female. 4 years later, in 1930, Abraham performed the first penectomy on his domestic servant called Dora. Domestic servant. What does that mean? Perhaps the most well-known patient to attend the Institute of Sexual Research was Danish painter Lily Ebb, whose first surgery was carried out at the clinic. Elb underwent 4 surgeries total, including a vaginoplasty, the last of which, a womb transplant, proved to be fatal. Over the years, the Institute gained a level of notoriety. It was considered impressive that it was not only able to conduct such research, but that it managed to exist independently for 13 years until until these guys rose to power. I don't even want to say the word. National Socialists. There. In 1933, Hirschfeld's luck ran out. The property was raided and destroyed by these soldiers. They ransacked the Institute's library, burning books and years of research in the street for all to see. This was, of course, filmed and later used as video propaganda. Fortunately for Hirschfeld, he was out of the country at the time. He would remain in exile, living in France until his death. Oh, so they were burning the books of the surgeries? Huh. In America, transsexualism hasn't received the same level of attention. The disorder continued to be obscure and uncommon. That changed in 1952 when Christine Jorgensen, a World War II veteran, returned home from Denmark. The New York Daily Times ran a piece, XGI Becomes Blonde Beauty, Operation Transform Bronx Youth. It detailed how Jorgensen had sought sex reassignment while abroad. The news story catapulted Jorgensen to fame, bringing sexual reassignment surgery to the attention of the American public. It also resulted in a 1970 Hollywood film about Jorgensen's life. Interestingly, around the same time, another figure was emerging in the world of gender and sex reassignment. John Money, a New Zealand sexologist and psychologist, received his PhD from Harvard in 1952. He went on to become a professor of medical psychology and pediatrics at Johns Hopkins University. While there, his work centered on a theory, one that is at the core of transgender ideology. Today, he is understood as the godfather of the modern transgender movement. Some also hold him squarely responsible for the gender theory that has infected young people in the West. Money, like other gender ideologues, insisted that gender is a social construct, one that is fluid and ever-changing. You may be asking yourself, how could Money possibly test his theory? He would need test subjects, newborn children that could be socialized as the other sex. And as unlikely as it may seem, that is precisely what Money did with a young Canadian boy, David Raymer. At around 7 months old, David suffered a catastrophic injury to his penis after a failed circumcision. And basically, the doctor decided to use a laser and just not a knife. Thank you, doctor. Always got to test it on someone who can't fight back, right? Have you ever seen the table they tie babies down to? How can a woman talk about not being able to give consent but then hand over their child? You're fucking retarded. Not knowing what else to do, David's parents took him to Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, Maryland, to see John Money. In this child, John Money saw an opportunity to test his theory and convinced David's parents to allow their son to undergo a surgical sex change. This would be the first sex reassignment surgery ever conducted on an otherwise normal, healthy child. The process entailed clinical castration, followed by 12 years of hormone therapy, along with social and mental conditioning to convince David he was a girl. Talk about the pictures he took. One extraordinary aspect of the story is that David had an identical twin brother, Brian, and this provided Money a matched control. This added an odd sort of credibility to the research, one which fascinated the wider medical community. Ultimately, the experiment was widely celebrated in the literature as an unequivocal triumph. This perception of success didn't just reside in medical literature. It also helped rewrite text in the mediums of psychology and sociology and cast doubt on the then common belief that masculine and feminine features are immutable characteristics coded in genes. The reality was considerably more grim. It would be 22 years later, in 1997, when the world learned the truth of the David Raymer experiment and its outcome. However, this information came too late. The ideological seeds of gender ideology had long been planted, watered, and grown by academia and the media. Doctors Milton Diamond and Keith Sigmundson published a document in the Archives of Pediatrics and Adolescent Medicine that laid bare the abject failure of Money's experiment. So that's something I have to go over. All right, we're going to go over that. I'm going to find that wherever the fuck it is, even if I have to pay for it. I'm going to read that. David never felt like a girl. He never accepted life as a girl. Although he eventually detransitioned, the damage was done. Yeah, because... Right. And let's not punish the doctors, right? When asked by Diamond and Sigmundson why he went along with the experiment, David answered simply that he wanted to please his parents. Sadly, in 2004, he blew his fucking brains out. He Kurt Cobained, and his brother died of a drug overdose. At the age of 38, he committed suicide with a single gunshot to his head. Yeah, he blew his brains out with a shotgun. The mental strain of public attention and his own personal struggles proved too much. We know today that this is not an isolated incident. Many individuals have taken their own lives after attempting gender reassignment, before soon realizing they wanted to revert back to their biological sex. Transgender activists often point to Money's experiment with David Raymer as proof that gender identity supersedes born sex. However, they fail to mention that David rejected this conditioning. He never felt female, and the trauma Money inflicted on him cost David not only his life, but a potential life of opportunity. To make matters worse, not only was the godfather of the modern transgender movement a child abuser, he was also, at the very least, a pedophile sympathizer. If experimentation on children wasn't bad enough, Money had an even darker side that is little discussed in the lionizing profiles of him written in transgender lore. Money believed that pedophilia was something that, if practiced properly, would suffer a child no harm. In 1991, Money was quoted by the pro-pedophilia magazine, Padika, having said, "If I were to see the case of a boy aged 10 or 11 who's intensely erotically attracted towards a man in his 20s or 30s, if the relationship is totally mutual and the bonding is genuinely totally mutual, then I would not call it pathological in any way." In his quote, he references adolescent boys being able to consent to relationships with men in their 20s. This line of thinking is often used to argue that a child can understand and consent to irreversible surgery and hormone treatment. This argument isn't steeped in any logical reasoning or scientific fact, and it largely drives what we are seeing in action today, the medicalization of children. The shift from consenting adults doing with their body whatever they choose to the aggressive push of gender ideology onto young people has been slow rolling for decades. The trouble today is that any legitimate criticism of this push is met with vitriol. The movement has become increasingly militarized and extremely effective at silencing critics. Worse still is the reality that doctors and medical professionals are failing at the most basic level. Explaining to parents and young people the long-term consequences and effects of transgender surgeries and interventions. Gender reassignment treatments for children, including hormone therapy and surgeries, have become increasingly common in recent years. Many medical professionals and institutions have taken a flippant approach to these treatments, prioritizing the validation of a child's transgender identity over properly informing them and their parents of the potential risks and consequences. Puberty blockers, for example, have been prescribed to children and teens in the hopes of halting puberty. However, these drugs have not been approved by the FDA for this purpose and have been shown to result in irreversible physical changes, such as stunted pubertal development, halted menstruation, and infertility. Lupron, one such puberty blocker, has not been shown to be safe for children and can interfere with brain development, potentially suppressing peak IQ and future cognitive capacities. There's also cases of young females being diagnosed with osteoporosis. I'm going to have to find those. I've had enough. Despite these risks, institutions like the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, or WPATH, super left-wing, super fucking left-wing, have claimed that the effects of these treatments are reversible, while simultaneously admitting that the long-term effects can only be determined when the earliest treated patients reach the appropriate age. This is explicit admission that they simply do not know because this is so new. We must await the passage of time to find out. One thing they do know is that when you halt a child's pubertal development, you are essentially freezing their sexual organ into a childlike state. These treatments can lead to a disease state that is not unlike the effects of a pituitary tumor, halting normal and healthy biological development in a child. The use of gender-affirming surgeries on minors as young as 15 years old is also a disturbing trend. In some states, a 15-year-old girl who feels like she is in the wrong body can have her breasts removed via a mastectomy, while vaginoplasty surgeries have been performed on youth as young as 16. This kind of intervention is nothing short of child mutilation and exploitation, and it is unconscionable that parents are allowed to consent to such treatments for their children. It is important to note that these are experimental procedures on vulnerable young people, and there is no reliable long-term data on their consequences. The sad, understated reality is that these are surgeries become more common. The number of detransitioners have also increased. These are individuals who transitioned in one way or another, but eventually reverted back to their original sex. My co-host. Oh, did that work?
Oh, hey. Hello?
Hey, sorry, I was in the middle of reading. I got to go back and forth and check.
No, I'm listening because you know what? I've been looking this stuff up for a minute now. As a matter of fact, I got banned off of Twitter for it.
You were banned?
Permanently banned off of Twitter.
Was this before or after Musk?
This is before.
Okay.
This is over a year ago. I got banned off of Twitter for discussing it.
The surgeries.
Yeah, mutilation. This is child mutilation. They are willing to experiment on children, even though they do know a lot of the results. They're still holding to the party line that it's reversible. How is it reversible when you have no breasts, that you're going to be a candidate for like cancer, that you've got to be screened for cancer for the rest of your life and everything else? And, you know, and what they do to girls who want to have the penis, you know, they take all of that muscle and everything out of their forearm to make this fake thing that doesn't work anyway.
Phalloplasty.
Yeah. I mean, what they are doing is shocking. It's shocking. And the entire Democratic Party is in favor of it. It's shocking. But go on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I have to find it somewhere. There's a study in here I want that the failure of John Money, so I'm going to have to find that. I'm going to cover that. I want to start covering more books or studies as well because it just needs to be talked about. All right, so thousands of case reports by individuals who realized that hormone therapy or surgery was a mistake. Many indicated that improper mental health support and a lack of informed consent landed them where they are. In short, doctors and physicians failed in one of their most basic duties: do no harm. The reality is that gender conversion is big business. Getting children in the doors of gendered clinics creates a lifelong big pharma customer. Pediatric versions of Lupron are much more expensive than the adult version of the same drug. I would also like to point out that the same drugs they give children, if they are reversible, why do they give them to pedophiles as a way to chemically castrate them if they're reversible? We will never know if the transgender movement was started with good or bad intentions, if the early surgeries and clinics were really acting in the best interest of patients, or if they were places of experimentation and perverse fascination. Who knows that more mainstream transgenderism has become, the more our children are being affected. The longer they are affected, the greater these problems will be down the road. When you get to the heart of it, there are a few realization of children. And this has a lot of other articles, but that was the big one I wanted to cover. Oddly enough, when I go onto Google, I can't find this. But in any case, I wanted to pull up. So, what did
I don't know if you can hear me, but you're in and out. You're real spotty.
I was the or do you want to do some YouTube?
You know what? You're real spotty. I'm hearing like every other sentence. I'm gonna go out and come back in, and maybe that'll help.
You said you're not able to hear me?
No, you're real spotty.
All right, no
you
problem.
keep breaking up. Let's see. I'm gonna go out and come back in.
All right, I'll take you out. Come back in, okay? Yeah. How is that? Is that better?
Yes.
All right. Was there anything you want to cover? I was just going to go.
You know what? You go for it, and I'll just be your sidekick making comments. How's that? I'll be your Ed McMahon. I just showed my age.
I know who Ed McMahon is. Okay. All right. Well, let me see.
Or what's the girl who works with Howard Stern? Not that I listen to him, but
Robin.
Yeah.
No, it's okay. Give me a sec. So I have this.
Let's see if I can do this on here. Yeah, I got silence. I don't know if you can hear me, but I got silence.
All right, I got one here. You ready?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Charged daughters to fight a classmate.
Nate, details. Nate tried in Natalie disturbing, saying facilitated and encouraged to be a fellow class. Now, just extra time who's charged, he claims that all of the charges here false. Even Andre charged with contributing to the as felony. Prosecutors say earlier this month the victim was walking to her bus stop here in Naperville when she was fostered in the step. Andre T was thrown to the ground by the sisters and punched as the beating was happening. The fight. The stepdad told me the victim and his daughter were friends and had as the beating was happening. The fight. The stepdad told me the victim and his daughter years old. The father says they do not condone violence.
Hey, Big, you got a real bad connection.
You're a boy, especially.
I don't know if you can hear me, but you got a real bad connection. You got a lot of
Thomas
silence.
and Teague were released after
You got a lot of
paying
silence, my friend.
$4,000 cash.
Yeah, my internet.
Yeah, I got you on
Let
my
me
big
try
screen.
to shut the
And you got a
stream
lot
down.
of silence. I don't know what StreamYard's doing, but yeah, you got a lot of silence. You got a
All
lot
right.
of broken. It's real broken up.
All right, give me about 3-4 minutes.
Okay,
I'll come back
all right,
on.
cool. All righty. I'll be
All
here.
right, see you in a bit.